Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of our 2 review here at Challenger Gaming Network. My name is Logan, and I cannot wait to tell you all about this new series, because the whole purpose of this series is going to be taking new games that come out and giving you the honest thoughts and kind of mini review that comes after the first 2 hours of gameplay of a new game. And the whole point behind this is really to give the listener the kind of feel that they need to determine whether or not this is a game that they're going to want to keep playing, or maybe within that 2-hour window they want to return it. And I hope to help you kind of rein in on your thoughts and kind of slim it down and make it more presentable. And today we are starting with none other than Throne and Liberty. It is the newest MMORPG that's hit the market and made waves, opening up on October 1st. And honestly, I am pleasantly surprised. I will say that when the game's first launched, I didn't really know what to expect. As a longtime WoW player myself, I kind of just went into it thinking, okay, this looks like a World of Warcraft, ESO, New World kind of vibe, and I think I can get behind that. And upon opening the game, that is the initial reception that I had. Now, I will tell you, if you do decide to play this, give it some time when you first launch it, because it does take a while for these shaders to compile. And I would tell you, don't mess with any settings while waiting for these shaders to compile, because for the first time ever with my PC, which I will have the specs down in the description so you can get a feel for what I'm working with, and for the first time ever, it actually crashed my PC entirely. Now, I'm not chalking that up to as a big deal, because honestly, a game like this, as graphics intensive as it is, I'm not really surprised. But as far as first technical impressions, it did throw me off a little bit. Once it was done, everything was fine. No issues there. Moving into the actual start of the game, the opening cinematic is absolute cinema. I have huge props to give for those guys. And I'm just going to go through what happens after that opening cinematic. Now, I will tell you, there will be some light spoilers from here on out. And I don't want you to get too turned away by that. I'm not going to give too much away, but I do want to tell you about the main vibes that you get from the initial gameplay and what the game brings you. Now, upon landing and being able to move on your own, the two things that it points out to you is that you have two combat/movement styles, we'll say. And I found myself going back and forth between them. I found the second one to be a little bit more intuitive, specifically because I was using a kind of more traditional MMO mouse with the number pad on the side. I ended up switching to it after a little while, and I found that to be a great help. I don't think that this game is very conducive for using the number pad with or the numbers on your number row with your left hand. I didn't feel like it was conducive to an efficient play style, and I did not feel like clicking the actual numbers was a conducive thing to do either. But that's just my 2 cents. As the game started to progress and I started to get into these mini cutscenes, I did notice something. The captions that are along the bottom, which do help you follow along, they are rough. There's times, I'll go ahead and throw this up for you. There are times when the captions are genuinely atrocious, and I don't mean to just sit here and bash and knock it, but at one point I was trying to be told about a key mechanic by this little goblin character, and as it turns out, he was telling me one thing, the captions were telling me another, and then by the end of it, I had no idea what the game was attempting to tell me. Now, you can gather and kind of just dork around with it and really come into its own, and you kind of get a feel for it. But I did notice that cropping up several times, and I'm a big captions guy myself, especially in an MMO like this when you're getting through this learning curve. I felt like it was very necessary, and I felt like they kind of missed the mark on that. Now, not all of them were that way, but just it was worth noting. As I moved through, I could not help but think, man, the cutscenes were just extremely well done. And as it mixed between that and the gameplay, I started to really dig down on it. It is a mix of like Final Fantasy, New World, uh, and Elder Scrolls Online, and they definitely took some inspiration from World of Warcraft. Now, I will tell you, this does feel more like a New World plus ESO mix, and then inspiration from some key mechanics from WoW. And then you kind of get the quirkiness of Final Fantasy. I feel like that's the best summation for it. Moving forward, I did find that I loved the narrator aspect that they have. After key points in the story, this soft-spoken female narrator will come on, and she will give you a quick recap of what you just went through. And I will tell you, I, at face value, would think, I'm not a fan of that. I'm actually a huge fan of that. It never felt like I was missing anything. I felt like it helped the cohesion of the storyline, especially early on. Moving on with that, I found that I loved the way it introduced the morphs. You get little guys that you can transform or morph into. For example, you get, if you do any floating from high ground, you get to be a bird. If you want to move fast while basically the sprint mechanic turns you into a wolf of some sort. You even get to be an otter when you go and swim in water. It's all stuff that I very, very much appreciated. Now, it then brought me into more of this kind of first initial boss fight. Felt very World of Warcraft style, World of Warcraft-esque, if you will. This game was very clearly built for MMORPG lovers. They took the AoE style straight from World of Warcraft. I don't have a problem with that. For somebody that played things like rogues and stuff like that, those kind of build sets, I actually found that to be even more intuitive than WoW because the movement was more intuitive than WoW. Now, like I said, you have a lot of these mini cutscenes where it's kind of, you have to press F or click through the dialogue, and they're voiced, at least the majority of them within these first 2 hours were voiced. Now, I have to say, and this can just be my opinion, and that's fine, but some, if not most of the characters, they're unfortunately very annoying. They're actually very grating to listen to. I found it actually pulled me out of the experience, if you will. I found it just so grating and so over the top and overdone that I didn't actually feel like I was having a conversation with another individual in this world. I felt very out of place. The voice actors, I think, were done well. I think they did their job well. I just think the direction they gave was far too heightened and too animated. Now, moving along with the little things that I noticed, at this point I started to click around in the settings and wanted to see how could I adjust quality, get better FPS, and all this kind of stuff. And that's when I found out the HDR, absolutely fantastic. In this game, there's a lot of games that have problem with HDR compatibility and support. I did not have that. As you probably have seen already in the description, I do run a 1440p ultra-wide monitor, hence the aspect ratio you're watching in. Now, as I was looking more in the settings and in the menus, I've noticed that, one, there is a lot of menus. It made it very difficult to parse through. It does its best to try to give you mini tutorials for each thing in it, but there is a lot to be desired. Now, I will say, let's be honest, this is an MMO. That's nothing new. If you're not new to MMOs, this is not going to be surprising. If this is your first foray into MMOs, you are going to be overwhelmed. I found myself, even as somebody who's played hundreds of hours of MMORPGs, the HUD and the menus and everything were just extremely overwhelming, and I didn't feel like it did a good job of fully fleshing out that the whole picture while you were getting involved and trying to get your feet under you. Now, I did find some more things, and it is worth noting that there is in this game a battle pass. It is a $10 US battle pass. I have mixed feelings on that. If this is something that can stand the test of time, it is a free game. I don't mind a smaller thing like that, but as an individual who plays a lot of games, I would love to see somebody move out of this just standardized battle pass thing. But like I said, at this point, I was trying to figure out more along the lines of the quality and what to expect of the video, the graphics, textures, and all of the settings, of which there are a lot of. Now, generally on the preset, it does run on the DLSS. It does help. DLSS obviously does help. I found that at 1440 on an ultra wide, it did run in the solid 60 to 80 for the most part during the main introduction. And that main introduction then lands you in your main first town, and then the frame rate became very, very inconsistent. As you start to do these fetch quests back and forth from the main town to the outlying areas, you do have some serious frame inconsistencies. Like I've said, you see, I'm running on a fairly decent system, and I was going from wild swings of 140 frames plus to 20 to 25. Now, they do give you a lot of ability to adjust things. Like I found in town, one of the biggest things that would sink my frames were that I had the setting for player visibility set to extreme, the highest setting, or extra rather. And that setting just shows you as many people in actual players in the surrounding area as it can. And that really did a hit on my frames. But I got to tell you, I found myself going, man, this world feels alive. It feels like a New World style gameplay. It feels like that New World style of interaction within a town. And I found myself going, okay, I'm a frame rate guy. I always prefer frame rate, but this is immersive in a fantastic way. And I found myself really enjoying that and actually keeping that on and just bearing with the lower frame rate. I found that to be actually okay. Now, it took me about 45 minutes to get into this first town, to kind of get into this open world feel. I will tell you, my first habit is once I get past that introduction, I immediately go into the map. I want to see what the game is showing me up to this point. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that the map has things built into it that are very reminiscent of World of Warcraft add-ons. Think Questy and stuff like that. It had a very cohesive feel to the map. I do wish there was a little bit smoother navigation, because you do get that overwhelming quest line feel to it, where you have 15 different things on your screen and all of them have waypoints on the map, but it's hard to distinguish which is which. I wish they clarified that a little bit, but I think overall it's actually well done. Now, the town and the exploration itself, like I said, it's a very New World style. It's very immersive. I found myself being very detailed in my examination of the world. I found it to be actually compelling graphically, and there were moments that you'll see throughout this where I stop and just look around. I haven't had a game that's made me do that in a long time, especially one with high fidelity in the MMO industry. I love World of Warcraft. I grew up playing World of Warcraft. I still play it. But I don't find myself going, man, what a gorgeous environment this is graphically. The fidelity is phenomenal. You don't get that with World of Warcraft. It's just part of it. And that's okay. That's not the vibe that it's trying to fill. However, this niche that they're going for with Throne and Liberty is actually well done in the graphics department. And I found myself being immersed. And adding to that immersion, the score for this game is utterly fantastic. I cannot tell you how much wandering around this town, seeing the verticality, seeing the little touches that it had that I wasn't expecting going into this, really surprised me. And then the cherry on top was I just found the score to be so appropriate, and I found it to be what tied everything together. Now, I will say, with the audio, it did end up being a touch inconsistent. I had cutscenes that would go from a normal volume that would spike up when one out of a couple of people would talk, and it threw me for a loop, I'll be honest. Now, this is pretty minor, because I would argue that the majority of this game is actually extremely well done when it comes to audio across the board. But there are some inconsistencies in the same manner that there are, some inconsistencies with the captions. Now, this game tries to set itself apart by doing two things: giving you a lot of new little things, and then polishing a lot of things that true MMO players already are familiar with. Now, I've mentioned the maps, I've mentioned the feel and the exploration is all stuff that feels very familiar, a lot of fetch quests early on, but then they have little things like the investigation mechanic, which I found to be a pleasant surprise, something I was not anticipating whatsoever. I needed to open a chest and solve this mystery at one point, and sure enough, it took a full investigation of a book to find little hidden things within it that exposed a key, which would then allow me to unlock this chest. I was not anticipating anything like that. It was not overdone, and I found it to be very similar to things like a pick locking mechanic, except I felt more involved, ingrained. I felt more adhered to the storyline, and I was very pleasantly surprised by that. And with that, I found that the flow of the game was actually incredible. A lot of games like this do not have a good flow from gameplay to cutscenes. MMOs have always been known for that. I can think back to many World of Warcraft and Elder Scrolls moments where they would shift me into a cutscene when I approached somebody of great importance to the overarching main quest line. And it would be very jarring going into this pre-cut, put together cutscene, and very high fidelity typically. Whereas in this game, the flow from one to another was shockingly smooth. Not something I ever expected to see in an MMO of this quality. And I did feel a lot of quality. Now, I do have to harp on a couple of things as we round this off. The first 2 hours are very, very fetch questy. Now, I don't have a problem with that, getting people involved in understanding the storyline and helping them to understand the game mechanics. I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is that the actual quests that it puts you through are very limited on the combat scale, which is part of this game's major upside. And instead of getting to involve myself in that and really learning these unique mechanics, I just found myself doing a bunch of fetch quests. For a new player, that's great. But for seasoned players, I feel like there should be an option to kind of stretch your legs a little bit more in what this game really has to offer, because I think people who are very familiar with this type of game style will be able to really wring it for all it's worth, and I mean that in a very positive way. Now, along with those different mechanics and different nuances, there are things like armor crafting and all of the crafting, upgrading, all the stuff that you expect from an MMO. That's nothing new. But I will say, of course, they take their own kind of lane with it, and I don't have a problem with that. I don't think it's poorly done. But what I will say is I think it's poorly explained. You mix that with the fact that the captions during these explanation series are just awful. They're just truly awful. And I think that they do a pretty rough job in the current state of actually bringing the player up to speed with what it is that they need to know. Especially on these more nuanced mechanics. But I think as I kind of rounded off my 2 hours, I came to the conclusion that the traversing of the world is just phenomenal. It's just extremely well done. You traverse the world in very smooth ways with smooth mechanics in a graphically seducing environment. It's gorgeous. You want to stop and you want to stare, and it's just unique. I didn't expect it. But it is a touch hampered by the current storyline. I think they throw too much detail of the storyline out too early, and it does confuse the player. I don't have a problem with bringing a lot of information to the player, but I felt like they brought too much detail. I felt like it was an overload. But to be honest with you, if I get to explore this gorgeous world and even doing these fetch quests I'm not getting bored with, I would grant that to be a net positive. And that's really the summation of my opinions in these first 2 hours. Is this a game that if I had paid for it, I would have returned it by now? No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, this is a game that has compelled me to continuously play it, to really think, man, I could sink a lot of meaningful time into this. And I would even consider the Battle Pass, to be completely honest with you. Now, I want to get further in and determine, does this kind of breach out of this fetch quest kind of feel? I would think so. As part of the intro cutscene, they show you what's expected and what's available in the world, and you see large party raids, you see these guild mechanics, you see all of these mechanics that are built for a larger player base and a larger party that we're familiar with in bigger games like World of Warcraft and Elder Scrolls and even Final Fantasy XIV. And I think they did a phenomenal job of tying that together. I just think that they need to tell the player about it more. I think if we could kind of get a little bit more of an explanation of what it is that we're looking at and tie it into this gorgeous world and this phenomenal exploration, I think they'd have something truly special on their hands. And to be honest with you, as it stands, I think it is something truly special. And I can't wait to put more time into it. This is going to be one of those games that I really sink my teeth into, and I'm actually looking forward to my next bout of playing it. But for now, I'm going to bring this to a close. As always, I hope you enjoy this. I hope this answers some questions and help you determine whether or not this is the right game for you right now. Because for me, I think it was. If you enjoyed, please give us a subscribe and give us a like, and go follow us on all our social medias. You'll find us at cgnofficial.com, and that's pretty much the same across all our social medias. Go check out some of our latest reviews and articles. But for now, my name is Logan. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.